It was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, a young woman setting off alone across the vast, beautiful landscapes of America. Her name was Rachel Bennett, a 29-year-old teacher from Oregon with a passion for travel and photography. She packed her small SUV with supplies, cameras, journals, and dreams. Her plan was to document every stop along the way, from mountain peaks to desert roads. For the first few weeks, everything seemed to go smoothly. She posted regular updates on social media, sharing photos and cheerful messages. But then, somewhere near the Texas-New Mexico border, the updates stopped. Her family became concerned when her phone went straight to voicemail. Days turned into weeks, and local authorities launched a search, combing through highways, motels, and gas stations. But Rachel had simply vanished, leaving behind no trace, no clue, no final message. Her disappearance quickly caught national attention, sparking speculation, theories, and online sleuths trying to piece together what happened. Was it foul play? An accident? Or did she simply decide to disappear? 6 long years passed with no answers. Her family held on to hope, clinging to every tip and rumor. Then, just when the case had gone cold, a fisherman near the Rio Grande noticed something strange tangled in the reeds along the bank. What authorities pulled from the water that day would change everything, and finally offer the first real clue in Rachel's disappearance. But what exactly did they find? And how does it connect to a trail that went dark all those years ago? Stay with us as we uncover the twists, the truths, and the heartbreaking mystery that left everyone asking the same question. What really happened to Rachel Bennett? Rachel's disappearance didn't make sense to anyone who knew her. She wasn't reckless or impulsive. In fact, friends described her as careful and deeply grounded. She had planned every part of her solo road trip months in advance, even mapping out campgrounds, safe routes, and backup plans. Her last known location was a small rest stop just west of El Paso, Texas. She had texted her sister a picture of the sunset. Her message read, "One of the most peaceful nights I've ever had." That was the last anyone heard from her. Authorities found her car a few days later, parked neatly off a dirt road not far from the Rio Grande. The keys were still in the ignition, the driver's door locked. Inside the SUV were her belongings: laptop, clothes, food, even her camera bag, but her main camera was gone. What puzzled investigators most was that there were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away, no broken glass. It was like she had just stepped out and vanished into thin air. The case quickly turned into one of the most baffling missing person stories in the Southwest. Detectives, private investigators, and even psychics got involved. Some thought she might have crossed into Mexico, willingly or not. Others suspected she had met someone during her trip, maybe someone she trusted. Her social media was combed over frame by frame, looking for clues, and while nothing obvious stood out, there were hints, a few vague captions, a mysterious comment that was later deleted, and one photo where she looked almost worried. Still, without evidence, the trail faded. Until now. What was discovered tangled in the banks of the Rio Grande 6 years later wasn't just shocking. It was something that changed the entire direction of the investigation. What they pulled from the river that day was an old, weathered backpacks, sun-faded and waterlogged. But inside were items unmistakably linked to Rachel Bennett. Her worn-out journal, still legible in parts, contained handwritten notes from the early days of her trip. There were photos, too, still sealed in a waterproof pouch, shots of desert, landscapes, roadside diners, and a few selfies. But one photo, taken near the river, stood out. Rachel wasn't alone. A blurry figure stood in the background, half turned toward the camera. No one in her family recognized the man, and facial recognition turned up nothing. That discovery reopened the case instantly. Theories swirled again. Some believed Rachel had met someone on her journey, maybe through a travel app or campground. Others suggested she might have stumbled onto something she wasn't supposed to see. Her journal entries grew darker toward the end, with vague references to strange trucks near the border and a feeling of being followed. One line simply read, "Don't trust the man in the hat." Meanwhile, a local rancher stepped forward with something that added another layer to the mystery. 6 years ago, on a late summer night, he remembered seeing headlights in the distance near the riverbank, unusual for that time. He thought it was Border Patrol at first, but when he drove closer, the vehicle sped off. He never got a clear look but remembered a decal on the back window, something that matched Rachel's SUV. That night always stayed with him. But he never connected it until hearing the news about the backpack. Investigators, Lisa began re-examining her digital trail. Messages that were once brushed off as harmless now seemed more cryptic. One in particular stood out, a voice note Rachel had sent to a friend days before she vanished. In a hushed tone, she said, "If something happens, tell them to start near the river." Asterisk, the voice note changed everything. It wasn't just fear in Rachel's voice, it was urgency, like she knew her time was running out. Investigators replayed it over and over, trying to catch background noise, a hint of location, anything. There was a faint sound of water, maybe the river, and something that almost sounded like a dog barking in the distance. Using that, search teams focused on a remote stretch along the Rio Grande, where access was limited and overgrown with brush. That area had never been searched properly before, not 6 years ago, and not since. As teams moved in, they found strange tire tracks buried deep beneath layers of dirt, almost completely erased by time. Not far from the tracks, hidden beneath a rusted sheet of metal, was what looked like the remains of a makeshift fire pit. Inside were fragments of burned fabric, part of what might have been a sleeping bag, and the melted corner of a camera lens. Forensic teams rushed to collect samples, while local law enforcement tried to piece together a timeline of who had access to that area and when. Back home, Rachel's family was torn between hope and dread. Her sister, Emily, returned to Texas to be closer to the investigation. She brought with her Rachel's old journals and began reading through them again, trying to make sense of the final pages. One entry stood out, a sketch of the area near the river, with a strange symbol drawn. Beside it, it looked like a brand or a logo. Emily took it to the lead detective, who immediately froze. It matched markings found on a fence post near the same riverbank just days earlier. Now, everything pointed to something more organized, something hidden in plain sight for years. And just when they thought they were close to answers, one of the search team members went missing. Asterisk, the disappearance of the search team member sent shockwaves through the investigation. His name was Mark Reyes, a seasoned volunteer who had worked on dozens of cold cases before. He was last seen heading toward a narrow ravine just beyond the River Bendan area, thick with brush and rarely explored. When he didn't return, teams launched a full-scale search. His gear was later found abandoned near a dried-up creek bed, but there was no sign of Mark himself. The eerie parallel to Rachel's vanishing sent a chill through everyone involved. Emily, now staying at a local motel, couldn't sleep. She kept going back to that strange symbol Rachel had drawn. Desperate for answers, she met with a retired border agent who had reached out after seeing her on the news. What he told her added an entirely new layer to the mystery. Years ago, he had encountered similar markings during patrols, always near old smuggling routes hidden in the terrain. But these weren't tied to any known cartel or group. Locals whispered about a network that operated quietly, almost invisibly, moving things and people through the region. No names, no records, just shadows and rumors. The agent believed Rachel might have seen something she shouldn't have, maybe even photographed it. And if that was true, it could explain why her main camera was never found. Her last posts showed her near that very area, With hashtags like #OffTheGrid and #HiddenTexas unknowingly marking her trail. Investigators now feared this wasn't a random disappearance, it might have been a cover dash-up. Then came the second twist. Forensics confirmed a partial fingerprint on the camera lens fragment pulled from the fire pit. It didn't match Rachel. It didn't match Mark, but it did match someone who'd been questioned in a different missing persons case just 2 years earlier, less than 40 miles away. The fingerprint led authorities to a man named Joel Carcena, drifter with a quiet past and a string of connections to isolated areas near the border. He had been questioned in the disappearance of another traveler 2 years earlier, but no evidence had tied him to the case until now. Joel had once worked as a maintenance contractor for a private ranch not far from where Rachel's SUV was found. That same ranch bordered the stretch of river where her backpack was discovered. When officials moved in to question him again, they found he had vanished just days before Mark Reyes went missing. As the investigation intensified, search teams were redirected to the outer edges of the abandoned ranch, guided by a mix of old maps, Rachel's journal sketches, and a newly uncovered GPS coordinate from her phone's cloud backup. Deep inside, a collapsed storage shed, hidden beneath rotting wood and debris, they made a haunting discovery: Rachel's missing camera, still intact. Inside, dozens of photos were stored, including several taken the day she disappeared. The last photo showed a shadowy figure standing at the river's edge, looking directly at her lens. But the most chilling detail wasn't the photo. It was the timestamp, most a full hour after Rachel's last known text to her sister. She hadn't vanished into thin air. Something or someone had kept her there. DNA evidence found near the camera and fire pit finally confirmed the unthinkable. Rachel had died the same day she vanished, but her body had been moved multiple times, hidden carefully in the terrain. Days after this revelation, Mark Reyes was found alive, disoriented but safe, in an old irrigation tunnel miles away. He had been left there, unharmed, with no memory of how he got there. And just when it seemed like the case was finally closed, Emily received an anonymous envelope. Inside was a single photograph: Rachel, smiling, standing beside someone who looked exactly like Joel Carson. Dated 3 days after her supposed death. Asterisk, the photo Emily received shook the foundation of everything they thought they knew. But after weeks of analysis, the truth came to light. The image had been digitally altered, an old photo of Rachel spliced with a shot of Joel Carson, taken years apart. Whoever sent it wanted to plant doubt, keep the mystery alive, and maybe stall the investigation. Authorities traced the envelope back to a post office drop box in New Mexico, but the trail went cold from there. Still, the evidence gathered from the camera, the fire pit, and the recovered photos was enough to officially close Rachel Bennett's missing person case. While they never found her remains, investigators were able to reconstruct the timeline and declare her presumed dead. Joel Carson was never found. His last known location was an old train depot near the border, but by the time officials arrived, he was gone. Some believe he fled the country. Others think he's still somewhere in the Southwest, hiding in the shadows. Mark Reyes eventually recovered and shared his account. He remembered being followed, then waking up in the tunnel with only flashes of light and voices. He believes he was left alive to send a message, one no one fully understood. For Rachel's family, the end brought some answers, but no real peace. Her sister Emily chose to publish Rachel's journal and photos, turning her story into a powerful reminder of how quickly a dream can turn into a nightmare. She now works with missing persons organizations, helping others find closure where she barely could. Rachel's solo trip across America was meant to be a journey of discovery. In the end, it uncovered something much darker. And even though the case is closed, one question still lingers: what else is hidden along the river that keeps so many secrets?